I let my wife turn our son into a monster. And now, all I can do is try to fix what's left of the family I broke by staying silent. It's been a long day, and sometimes the only way you can really breathe is to just talk. Even if you're just talking into the void of the internet. I don't even know where to begin, except to say that the woman I married disappeared years ago. When I first met her, she was electric. The kind of person who walked into a room and the whole place just lit up with her. She laughed with her entire body. She hugged like she meant it. She remembered the little things. And I fell so hard. We took our time. 6 years before we got married. And those 6 years were the happiest of my life. But her parents, they hated me. Not in a loud, obvious way. It was in their eyes. The way they looked at me like I was something their daughter would eventually get bored of. I didn't come from money. My background wasn't good enough. They had a whole life mapped out for her, and I wasn't in it. They'd say things like, "He's too average. Your children need strong bloodlines." Yes, that's the kind of language they used. When we got married, they insisted on a prenup. I didn't fight it. I was so in love, I thought, we'll never get to that point. I just signed it. I told everyone that love mattered more. And at the time, it really did. Then she got pregnant with our first son, Nick. And things started to change. It wasn't overnight. It was a slow drip of poison. Her mother's whispers, her father's influence, and suddenly, that prenup wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a weapon. Every single argument, every disagreement, ended with the same threat. We can just divorce. I stayed. I thought it was postpartum that she was scared. I kept hoping the woman I married would come back. Her father did soften, eventually. He saw how I stayed, how I didn't give up, and we actually became friends. Her mother never did. Not until the very end. A few years ago, both of her parents passed away within months of each other. And right before her mother died, she looked at me in that quiet hospital room, and she apologized. She told me she regretted poisoning our marriage. She said she was wrong. Her father had said something similar before he passed. He just looked at me, tired, and said, "Take care of my daughter." I wish I could say those apologies fixed everything. They didn't. But for the first time in forever, when my wife was grieving, I saw a flicker of the woman I once knew, hiding behind her eyes. And I held on to that flicker for dear life. A couple of years passed, and that flicker was gone. Nick was our firstborn. After he was born, my wife struggled with postpartum depression, and a part of her just hardened. 2 years later, our second son, Scott, was born. And that's when the imbalance became impossible to ignore. If Nick, just a toddler, made a mistake or cried, she'd scold him. "Hold yourself together. You're the big brother." But if Scott so much as whimpered, she'd rush to him, coddling him like he was made of glass. At first, I tried to excuse it, but it never stopped. Nick would bring home an A+ on a project he'd poured his soul into. She'd give it a little nod and set it aside. An hour later, Scott would bring home some drawings she'd practically done for him, and she'd put it right on the fridge. She'd call her sister to brag about how gifted Scott was. Nick would just stand there. His face wouldn't even move. But I could see something inside him go quiet. I confronted her one night. I just asked her, "Why are you treating them so differently?" She didn't even hesitate. "If you don't like it, divorce me. You signed the prenup. You'll walk away with nothing." And I realized it wasn't about money. I paid for everything. Her inheritance was modest. It was about control. It was the shield she held up, so she never had to look at what she was doing. Meanwhile, Scott was learning. He learned that consequences weren't for him. If I grounded him, she'd take him out for Big Macs. He learned he was special. Adored. An automatic priority. Nick was just an afterthought. One night, I found Nick, he was only 8, crying on his bedroom floor. So quiet, trying not to be heard. He looked up at me and asked, "Dad, why does Mom love Scott more than me?" I had no answer that could fix that kind of pain. All I could do was tell him that I would always love him. But inside, I was terrified, because I could already see where this was going. One son was growing up wounded, and the other was growing up dangerous. And, if you can believe it, it only gets worse from here. By the way, if you're still with me on this, make sure to hit that subscribe button because you're not going to believe where this road ends. By high school, things were no longer subtle. Scott became the center of our universe. His room turned into a shrine to entitlement. He was obsessed with those anime stories where some average guy gets handed a kingdom for doing nothing. His shelves were lined with My Little Pony figures, half-clothed female anime statues, and unopened Gundam kits. He'd fly into a rage if he lost a Pokemon match. He developed this attitude that the world owed him everything. My wife bought him every new console, every gadget. And anytime I tried to set a boundary, she'd just hold up that prenup. Scott started carrying himself like he was some kind of gift to the world. He grew a beard he called rugged and would lecture us at dinner about how he was smarter than Steve Jobs and Bill Gates combined, all while refusing to do the simplest chores. Then came the incident at school. A girl politely turned him down. He couldn't handle it. He followed her behind the gym. He got aggressive. Thank God, Nick saw what was happening. Nick and a few other students stepped in and pulled Scott away. Scott got suspended. At school, they thanked Nick for being a hero. At home, my wife punished him. She screamed at him for embarrassing the family, for being jealous of his brother. She defended Scott. She blamed the girl. And I just watched the light in my son's eyes go out. I took Nick out for ice cream that night because I didn't know what else to do. I told him how proud I was of him. And then I sat in the car and realized I had failed both of them. One by not stopping what he was becoming, and the other by not protecting him from the fallout. When it came time for college, my wife flat out refused to help Nick with tuition. She said, with a straight face, that all their savings were for Scott, because Scott had potential. That's when I finally lost it. But she just pulled out the prenup again. She didn't know I'd seen this coming. For years, I'd been quietly putting money away in a separate account. I even had my boss adjust my pay on paper. I paid for Nick's entire tuition myself. He's working hard, living in a dorm, doing it the right way. Scott, on the other hand, has dropped out of college multiple times. He quit an electrician program after a month because the work was beneath him. My wife told him she was proud of him for not settling. She keeps trying to set him up with her friends' daughters. The last time, the poor girl thought she was meeting Nick. Scott showed up in a shirt 2 sizes too small, sweating, breathing heavily, and talking about his royal bloodline. The girl and her mother practically ran out of the restaurant. Scott came home in a rage, screaming about how the world was blind to his greatness. My wife just sat there with him, handing him bags of fast food, nodding along as he raged. And I sat across from them, silent, realizing I had to stop this. A few years passed. Nick graduated from university. His mother refused to come. Her excuse? Scott was having a bad day, and Nick should have skipped his own graduation to support his brother. I didn't even argue. I just went. I watched my son walk across that stage, and I've never been more proud. He never came back home after that. I don't blame him. Then one day he called me to meet him, and that's when I met Mia. She was calm, grounded, and kind. And the way she looked at my son, I could see it instantly. They were in love. Meeting her family felt like stepping into another world, a normal world. Her father and I sat in his garage, just 2 dads sharing a quiet understanding. There were no judgments, no expectations. In that moment, I realized the painful truth. I had failed to give Nick the family he deserved. But somehow, against all odds, he had found it for himself. And I swore I would protect it no matter what. When Nick decided to propose, we knew his mother and Scott couldn't be part of the celebration. It hurt to admit that, but it was the truth. The proposal was perfect.
She said yes.
And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. But I knew it wouldn't last. I knew we'd have to have the family dinner. The dinner went exactly as I feared. My wife was sickly sweet, calculating. Scott showed up in a stained My Little Pony t-shirt with crumbs in his beard and immediately started trying to flirt with Mia. He boasted that he'd soon be a CEO and that Andrew Tate would be lucky to meet him. Mia shut him down gracefully, but he couldn't handle the rejection. He stormed off, screaming, "It's not fair. She should be mine." Later that night, I walked past his room. The door was cracked open, and I saw it. Taped above his computer was a printed-out photo of Mia in a bikini. My blood ran cold. I stepped into the doorway and said, "Stay away from her. I'm not asking." For the first time, he looked scared. When I confronted my wife, she was too calm. And that's when I knew.
She was planning something.
The wedding was beautiful, despite Scott trying to make himself the center of attention and my wife scouting for potential partners for him among the high-profile guests. But the peace was just a fragile illusion. Months later, Mia was heading up a huge fashion show. Everyone was helping. My wife suggested Scott be given a small role to feel included. It was a disaster. He was inappropriate with staff and even tried to have one of the main financial backers removed from the venue. But that was nothing compared to what came next. I was at work when I got the call. The call that every parent dreads. Mia had gone to our house. My wife had given her something to drink. She was paralyzed, conscious, but unable to move or scream. And Scott tried to force himself on her. He was half naked, standing over her when Nick burst in. A fight broke out. Thankfully, some of Nick's friends were with him, and they pinned Scott down while Mia was rushed to the hospital. When I finally confronted my wife, the mask was gone. She looked at me, her eyes empty, and said Mia belonged to Scott. She said that drugging Mia and letting Scott have her would secure our family's future. The woman I loved was gone. She had been gone for a long time. I just hadn't been willing to see it. I left that night. Scott was arrested. My wife tried to visit the hospital, but Mia, strong, incredible Mia, told her to her face to never come near her again. Then my wife was arrested too. She and Scott are facing charges together. I failed. As a husband, as a father, I failed. And that failure almost cost Mia her life. It's been a couple of years now. I live near Nick and Mia. I live near my grandchildren.
Yes.
A boy and a girl. The day they were born, I felt something break and heal all at once. My wife is in prison. The trial revealed everything. Her debts, her schemes to use Mia's family for their wealth. The way she fed Scott's obsession. The judge gave her 5 years. I visited her once. She tried to manipulate me, even mentioned the prenup. I just reminded her we were divorced, and I walked away. Scott is also in prison. I heard it hasn't been easy for him. I visited him once, too. He cried and begged and promised to change. I told him the truth. I failed him as a father, but he was a grown man who made his own choices. Then I told him I sold every last one of his collectibles. His figures, his games, his cards. His entire kingdom was gone. The house sold. He just sobbed. I didn't stay to watch. There isn't a day that I don't carry the weight of what I allow to happen. But I can't change the past. All I have is what's left. So now I spend my days helping with my grandchildren. I read them stories. I fixed things around the house. I watched my son laugh a real, unguarded laugh. I am still full of regret. I don't think that will ever go away. But I will spend every second I have left protecting this beautiful family my son built. It's the only atonement I have left. I know I failed in so many ways, and I have to live with that. But what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know what you think in the comments.
I really want to know.